Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Today is our third day here at the conference of the business sustainability and family businesses in Saudi Arabia. Our first session today will be with our colleagues from PwC to talk about supporting the sustainability of family businesses in Saudi Arabia through the new corporate law. Today we have a very distinguished and important guest with depth of experience in family businesses, not just only in Saudi Arabia, but in the whole region. We have Mr. Amin Naaser and we have Mrs. Nora Muhammadi. I will give them the floor right now to first introduce themselves. Then they will take us through the study that they've done on behalf of the National Center for Family Businesses to review the new corporate law and review the articles that are related to the family businesses, and in particular to increase and ensure sustainability in family businesses. So good morning, Mr. Amin. Good morning, Mrs. Nora. And it is our pleasure to have you here on the third day of the conference. I will leave you the floor right now, and I may interrupt you during your presentation, maybe just to highlight some points that needs to further elaboration. So good morning, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Talal. I would first of all like to thank the National Center for Family Businesses giving us the opportunity to talk in this very important event. And I also want to thank all of you for dialing in. And I hope that you and your families are doing well and keeping safe in these challenging times. As you all know, the family business sector in Saudi, in KSA, and actually in the region is considered crucial for the economic development. Sustainability of these businesses is an important issue. And as such, as Talal said, the Center for Family Business wanted to develop a deeper understanding of what the issues are and how these family businesses can be supported. And they've asked PwC to carry out a study, and Nora and I will be covering it. But before we do that, let's just introduce ourselves. My name is Amin Naaser. I'm a senior advisor with PwC Middle East on the private and entrepreneurial side. I've been in the region for 30 years or so, and during this time, I've helped a number of families address their issues around succession, around continuity, around conflict management, and I've helped a number of families develop, their structures, their constitutions and protocols. So that's who I am, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. And I'll pass over to Nora to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting us today. My name is Nora Al Mohammed. I am at PwC Legal, the client-facing legal arm of PwC Middle East. I lead the family business from the legal perspective across the region, including KSA. It's my pleasure to be with you today.
Great. Thank you, Nora. So what we will be doing, just to kind of give you an overview of the agenda today. So we'll start off talking a bit in general about family businesses in Saudi and some of the challenges that these family businesses face, and really our key recommendations around what we've defined as the three important pillars. And these pillars are succession planning, family and corporate governance, and sustainability. And what we also decided to do is to give you a kind of a helicopter view around some of the dynamics that we're facing at the moment in the region around family conflicts. And this is about understanding what are the causes of these conflicts and what is it that families can do to address these conflicts. So that's in general our agenda, and then Nora now will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So basically, just going on to this to the next slide. This actually just sets out some of the key statistics, and you can see that, I mean, it's self-explanatory. 63% of all businesses in Saudi are family-owned, and that is quite a large percentage. And actually 45 of the top 100 businesses in Saudi are family-owned. And also the family businesses are the key employers, if you like. 76% of the private sector are employed by family businesses. So that kind of demonstrates how important family businesses are. And actually, the family businesses are quite diversified. You know, they're operating in different sectors: manufacturing, banking, services sectors, etc. And also 66.7 billion in domestic investments is held by family businesses. And indeed, a lot of the franchises, many of the franchises across the kingdom are owned by family businesses and operated by family businesses. And with the opening up of the economy and with Vision 2030, many family businesses are looking for partnership opportunities with foreign companies for both global as well as regional kind of development and expansion. So this slide really talks about some of the organizations dedicated to support family businesses in Saudi. And of course, you've got the National Center for Family Business, which provides, diverse services to family businesses, educational workshops, trainings, this particular presentation, counseling services and coordination with authorities. And you've got the Saudi Governance Center, and that also helps family businesses through various training and networking events. And I'm sure they'll do more in the coming months as well. And then finally, you've got the Chambers of Commerce, which play a very important role as well in terms of family businesses in the kingdom. So really here, what I'd like to say here is, look, the family businesses in the Middle East really began as entrepreneurs about 70 to 80 years ago, and over the years created very successful conglomerates. And some of these have become, powerhouses in the Middle East. The other point to make here is that a lot of these families in Saudi are in the second and third generation. And what's going to happen is we see in the next 5 to 10 years, we see a number of these families going through a generational change. What does that mean? That means that a lot of the wealth and ownership structures of the families will be passed over to the next generation. And the point that I'd like to make here is that if this transfer of wealth takes place in an organized manner, it will promote growth, it will promote stability, it will promote economic growth in the Middle East, and everything will be fine. But if the generational change is not handled well, then you will see quite a lot of fragmentation of family businesses, the results of which might be catastrophic. The other point to make is, as the family businesses move into the next generation, you have the younger generation coming up, and the younger generation coming up are better educated, and they're more used to having a structured governance process, not necessarily dependent on individuals. And therefore, the next generation is going to create a lot of dynamism and a lot of changes. The other point that I'd like to make here is that in the region, we have a number of conflicts, and we'll talk about conflicts later on in family businesses. But we are very lucky because from a culture point of view, we have deep respect for the older generation and the founders. And this, to a certain extent, has protected the families from splitting up. But you have to ask yourself the question, what happens in the future when the founder generation and the older generation are no longer there? Surely these conflicts will arise and cause a lot of issues. Here, what I'd like to say, this is really the survival rates of family businesses through generations. What I'd like to say here is that in my experience, and I always say this to our clients, family businesses face dual challenges. They have to operate in a very difficult economic environment where you have COVID-19, you have falling in oil prices, you have the global slowdown, you have the Chinese, US trade wars, all these issues that cause a lot of stress from a business point of view. As if that's not enough, family businesses also have to deal with generational change, the transition of the family members into the next generation, and they also have to deal with family conflicts. And those are the dual challenges that families face. Now, the good news is that if you look at research, family businesses outperform other businesses by almost 15%. And that makes sense because, family businesses take a long-term view, they're very agile, they don't overextend themselves. And those are some of the reasons why they outperform their peers. But the bad news is that a very small percentage, 3 or 4%, of these family businesses survive beyond the fourth generation. And this is a huge concern, not just to the economies of the Middle East, but also to the governments of the Middle East, because family businesses play such a pivotal role in the economies for the Middle East. So we also think that the governance and succession planning still remains a priority. Continuity and succession is critical, is crucial. It is important that each family has a vision for the future. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that today, some of the families are small. You have 8 or 10 members, but in the next generation, every generation is about 25 years. In the next generation, the family numbers could increase to 40 or 50, depending on the family size. And really, families need to understand what are the barriers that families will face moving forward. So things like, how are you going to deal with family members who decide to leave the family business in the future? How are you going to value their shares? There are going to be conflicts between family members. How are you going to deal with conflicts? Dividends, for instance, is a big issue in the region, and it's about balancing the needs of the business and the needs of the family. How are you going to address the dividend distribution issues? How are you going to make decisions in the future? Shareholders make decisions, the board makes decisions, management makes decisions. So decision making is quite important, and it's easy when the family is not that many people. When you have 8 to 10 people, decision making is easier. But can you imagine when you have 40 or 50 people? It becomes very, very difficult. The other things that we're seeing is a number of families are pushing now to ensure that they have an effective board. So what they're trying to do is to make sure that whoever is on the board is someone that can add value to the board. And they're also promoting the involvement of independent directors as well. Families are also improving their transparency and communication, and we'll talk more about that later on. But also, families are increasingly trying to create protocols or family constitutions, which formalize the business relationship between brothers and sisters and cousins. But actually, the issue here has always been the extent to which some of these protocol requirements can be legalized, and Nora will talk about that a bit later on in her presentation. The legal system needs to do a bit more to enable family businesses legalize some of the protocol requirements. So, as we said, we have prepared our presentation to address the 3 main pillars And these three main pillars are succession, governance, and sustainability. And we'll talk about these three pillars individually and provide you with the recommendations that we have as we carried out our study. I'm now going to pass over to Nora, who will talk about succession.
Thanks, Amin. So the first of these pillars that Amin just mentioned is succession planning. And we'll take you through some key aspects on succession planning. The first one would be legalization of the protocols. The family protocols or constitution sets the framework and gets the shareholders at the same page to be united on their thinking. However, this document by itself is not typically drafted in a legally binding arrangement. We think the new initiatives from Saudi, being a pioneer in mentioning the family-owned businesses in the commercial companies law, the draft law, and issuing الميثاق الاسترشادي العائلي by the Ministry of Commerce. These are great initiatives. However, you will require some legal mechanisms and tools to have these such documents enforceable. One of these tools can be by having a bespoke constitutional document or bespoke articles of association. However, as this might be sometimes challenging due to practical regulatory aspects. Hence comes the role of the other mechanism or the other tool to legalize such protocols, which is having a shareholders agreement. Which shareholders agreement typically addresses unexpected events, such as exit of a shareholder, valuation in case of exit, selling to third-party non-family members. It's really important for families to have the protocols and also to ensure that such protocols are enforceable. The next aspect is voting rights, and it's a very important point as it is linked to the decision making. While voting rights is not really or may not really be relevant to the first generation, but in future generation to come, not every successor might want to be part of the family business or might not be capable to be part of the family business. There should be a balance between contribution and sharing. For example, maybe you'll have a family member who does not want to be part of the family, but they just want to receive profits or dividends at the end of every year. Other case where sometimes we have passive shareholders, such as waqfs, where you don't want al-waqf to be participating in the management and running the business. May not have the expertise to do that as well, but you want to ensure that al-waqf receive the right dividends or profits. Therefore, a very good legal mechanism to accommodate and have the flexibility of these terms will be to have different classes of shares, where you set up a class of shares that is, for example, you can participate in dividends without really controlling or having voting rights in the company. The next point on succession planning is the right of first refusal, which is vital to keep the business within the family. Preemption, when you have a family member who wants to exit the family, this may result in an unwanted situation, or unwanted third party becoming a shareholder with the other family members. So what is preemption right? Preemption right is a concept oblige the selling shareholder to offer the sale shares first to the current shareholders. This is sometimes a right granted by law, and it depends on the type or the legal form of the company. While it's granted, for example, for limited liability companies, it's not the same case for closed joint stock companies, for example, in Saudi Arabia. Accordingly, allowing family shareholders to agree and enforce preemption rights to their own business would serve a great goal in keeping the business within the family. Move to
just do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Protection of minority shareholders. Non-family shareholders or investors are usually not really encouraged to invest in family businesses, because simply they feel like they don't have enough say or voting for and decision making for the business. If we want to encourage minority shareholders who are non-family members to participate in the family business, we need to provide them maybe with some guarantees that their voice will be heard and they will be involved in the key strategic decisions, such as material sale of assets or liquidations, or maybe a merger with a third party. So giving them the comfort that they will be part of the decision making for such reserved matters is essential. Another mechanism to keep the business within the family is the buyback of shares. An example of that can be when a shareholder, when family member shareholder want to exit the family, want to sell their shares, and they offer their shares to the current shareholders. However, the current shareholders, the family members, may not have enough liquidity to buy such shares. Here, it becomes very important for the company to step in and buy its own shares. The company, by that, will be basically doing a warehousing for and on behalf for the future commerce. So this is another mechanism that the family business can adopt to reduce the risk of family members selling their shares to third-party non-family members. The next point is focused on personal liability of family members. It is a twofold issue. This aspect, the first fold, is very much also relevant to our region, and we're all the founders of the family business that started building their business from scratch. And when you are doing that, you really have to do whatever it takes to build and grow your business. So we saw, and we're still seeing, unfortunately, that they provide personal guarantees against their personal assets to secure loans and bank facilities with the bank. The other fold for this aspect is the banks. The banks that historically, and from experience, we are still saying that they request the founders to provide personal guarantees instead of corporate guarantees. This should be resisted to protect the family personal assets, to ring-fence the liability of the shareholders, and to reinforce the distinction between family and business assets. The next aspect and the final aspect actually on the succession planning is around minimum listing requirements. Family businesses looking to IPO typically only want a small percentage of their shares to be held by non-family members. to retain a greater level of control within the family shareholders. Accordingly, a review of the existing listing requirements and consider reducing maybe the minimum free float percentage for family businesses to allow them to access the capital markets with only limited loss of control, and to provide an exit rule for shareholder. So far, we talked about key aspects on succession planning. There are many others that to consider, and we usually advise families on their succession planning strategies. Now we're going to focus on the corporate governance pillar. Okay. And maybe the first point here, which is also, as you know, very much relevant to the initiatives currently done in Saudi Arabia, having the family governance. Well, it's really important for each family, as Amin said, to have its own governance rules that are based on best practice. It is important that they choose the rules that suits their business and their requirements. The ask here is only for these rules, whatever they are, to just be set very clear, transparent, to manage and set the right expectations for the future generations, and to avoid any conflict. What we'd like to see more is basically the families mandated to have this governance, especially when family-owned businesses are meet certain criteria of size, geographic size of revenue, or generational phase. That would be really good, and I think the Al-Mithaq Al-Istirshadi is doing a great job in this area. Okay. My next point is related to guidelines on dividend distribution, and the key to get the right dividend distribution policy. The key is to have the right balance between the business needs and the financial needs of the family members. The lack of transparency and communication about how dividends are distributed and calculated is a challenge, and Amin will we'll talk to this more in a conflict context in a while. But what we see in practice, how this point and this lack of clarity can cause conflict between shareholders, especially between those who want to withdraw funds as dividends and those who want to retain the profits to grow the business. Therefore, financial discipline and building up sufficient reserve is critical to react to unforeseen circumstances, such as the crisis we are living now. 18 months ago, none of us knew about COVID, and only companies who with sufficient cash and sufficient reserve were able to react and survive in such a crisis. Move next to the effective board of directors. This can be a session on its own, so let's touch only on two key points here. Family members being board of directors and non-family members. Family members being board of directors and setting clear criteria on what a family member have to have in order to be eligible to be a board member in terms of education, experience, training, etc. The other point is about non-family members, and we see more and more non-family members filling the role of a director or executive director in the family business, and those are often industry experts. Of course, you want someone who you trust to be managing your company, but At the same time, you need someone who have the right expertise to run the business. So maybe a mix between both would be a good practice to adopt or to think about. Dispute resolution mechanism. I mean, it's very obvious. It's basically mixing in one sentence family and business. So the conflict in this formula is honestly a rule rather than being an exception. Some families may have the approach, and we love this in the Middle East because it goes in our culture and DNA, that when we have a problem, when we have a conflict, we go to the elderly or the founders and we ask them, which unfortunately isn't sustainable. The other approach can be just to like avoid the conflict, not to speak about it, decide, basically not to decide. Both approaches are not that sustainable. Therefore, we recommend that each family have a council, conflict council, to sort out these conflicts or issues in an amicable way within the family. Some families though like to have a phased approach or a stage approach, where you first go to a family council, appointed family council for a conflict. But if the outcome of that is not successful and the conflict is not resolved, maybe you go to a third-party mediator, who is someone that the conflicting parties trust. Needless to say that you will always have the extreme legal mechanisms or measures with litigation and arbitration, which we, of course, do not recommend in terms of family business. I'll go down to valuation guidelines and exit process. It's really important for families to set out how individual family members may exit the business. For lots of families that we advise and design such exit, the concern of the older generation that the coming generation may not want to be part of the business. How these family members exit and how families value the shareholding is critical to the sustainability of the business. Therefore, it's important that these provisions are set clearly in the constitution or the protocols and the shareholders' agreement. The next point is on the corporate governance is to have an annual declaration of compliance. We're not going to dwell on this, but what we want to do as a best practice is to have an annual declaration by family business to encourage families to embed good governance practice and revisit this always from time to time. The last point here is to have clear definition of how governance practice can be put in operation. This is basically around the actual implementation of the corporate governance put in place. What we see is a top-down approach, putting in place clear and comprehensive delegation of powers for the board of directors, who can sign on what. Maybe for example, for certain contracts with material contracts with certain value, or contracts that are, or decisions are that it comes with like a greater risk. For that, you should have and set clear authority and who can sign and who can decide on such aspects.
Nora, may I interrupt you here a little bit? You mentioned we are talking about the family and corporate governance, and maybe one of the things that makes a lot of family businesses hesitate on implementing corporate governance to the family businesses is the fear of the complexity of the governance, and the fear of that not all the partners who come from the same family understand that. So how complicated is it, or how complicated does it have to be in issuing governance for the family business? Does it have to be very complicated? Does it have to be simple? Because, you know, some people from the family find themselves just only partners in a family business. When you try to come up with the governance and you use complicated structure, they feel that they are left out and they don't understand and they are not engaged. So maybe you and Amin can give us a guideline and give our audience a guideline about the importance of simplifying the governance.
Thanks, Talal. This is a very good question. And the simple answer to that is keep it simple and clear. Having a governance in place doesn't mean to fall in the trap of being go into like bureaucracy and there's so many layers and all of that. It doesn't have and shouldn't be complicated. We just need the corporate governance or the protocols of the the corporate governance to be clear and transparent to set the right expectations in the future. That's it. No, Amin, if you would like to add anything to this.
Yeah. I mean, Talal, what is important here, and I always mention this to families, you know, it's not just important to professionalize the business. It's also important that you professionalize the family as well. So governance is not rocket science. It's not meant to be complicated. It's just about making sure that you have checks and balances and transparency and accountability at all levels. And that doesn't necessarily mean the system is going to be complicated. People need to know what their responsibilities are. What are your responsibilities as shareholders? What are your responsibilities as board members? And what is it that management do as well? In many cases, these responsibilities are mixed and people don't really understand where they stand. So it's really about education. It's about educating shareholders to understand what their responsibilities are in terms of good corporate governance. It does not have to be complicated.
Absolutely.
We always receive a question from a lot of families. What is more important, to have a clear governance or to have a family execution? And what comes first? So some small family businesses believe if they have the family constitution, that will be enough. Some other believe that the family constitution comes after having a clear governance to the family business. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah. So you know, I think that both are equally important. But if I were to advise a family, the family constitution is much wider. So the family constitution will start off with what is our vision as a family. Okay. So this is not corporate governance. This is what are we here for? You know, what are we trying to do as a family from a family point of view and from a business point of view? Is our vision aligned? You know, what businesses do we want to get into? What are we going to do about our next generation? So these are the frameworks that actually are very, very important before you develop your corporate governance. You need to understand, and the families need to agree on their vision for the future. Aligning this vision is extremely important. It's a very difficult process, but if you reach an alignment of vision between the shareholders, the sky is the limit. You can do a lot, and then you can then strengthen on the corporate governance side.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thanks. So I think we just covered the two pillars being succession planning and corporate governance, and I believe it to Amin to speak about sustainability.
Okay, so Nora has covered the two very important pillars, in fact, around succession and corporate governance, because I think those are the big ticket issues that that families face. Now, this section around sustainability is also important, and what we did is we tried to look out and see what other family businesses in the world and in the region do to support sustainability of family businesses. And one of the things that we found is that, look, the government and the semi-government agencies have a very big role to play, has a very important role to play in institutionalizing and promoting governance and best practices. So it's really about these institutions to encourage coordination and alignment, to promote family business agenda. It's about making sure that the family business voice is being heard. And that means that families need to have close interaction between them and these agencies to understand, so that people understand the issues and challenges that family businesses face. Because family businesses are unique. As I said, they face not just business challenges, but they face family challenges as well. And therefore, these things are quite important. The other area is obviously around the education and skills development. And here, when I talk about skills, I'm talking about the development of the next generation. And I think what we see the rest of the world doing is the institutions are developing bespoke programs for next generation development through training sessions. And it's really organizations such as the National Center for Family Business, the Saudi Chambers of Commerce, the Saudi Governance Center. These institutions can provide the opportunities for next generation development. So the topics here for next generation could include things like entrepreneurship, things like financing, things like developing leadership. Studies are indicating that a lot of family businesses fail because of lack of leadership. And the next generation need to realize the importance of good leadership. What does that actually mean? And also things like, how to minimize conflicts and things like that. So there's a lot of work that can be done in terms of developing and educating the next generation. The other area is quite interesting. We found in certain European countries, they implemented traffic light rating systems, and these are the banks and the financial institution beginning to appreciate, understand, and recognize those families who incorporate good governance. So, for example, if a family has a protocol in place, a constitution in place, they have good corporate governance, they have a strong board, the banks and the financial institution in some parts of the world will recognize that and offer better ratings to those companies because they have good governance practices. And I can actually share a live experience that I had a couple of years ago when a family business called me up. The founder of a family business called me up, and he said to me, I'd like to thank you. And I was a bit suspicious about that because not many family founders call me to thank me just like that. And he said, no, I really want to thank you. And I said, okay, please, explain. And he said, well, what happened is I shared my family protocols and my corporate governance structures with my bank. And my bank has placed me in a different risk bucket. That means that my rates in terms of lending and all of that kind of thing have been reduced. And I get better rates now because the banks are comfortable about the structure of our business and what we've done to address succession and generational change. So the traffic light rating system is something that we're recommending that these should be implemented in Saudi and the region as well. The other thing is we found is universities and academia can play a very important role. And we find that the close associations between universities and the private sector has proved quite effective in knowledge sharing and developing of database information, etc. And that is something good to have. You know, this relationship with the academic universities as well. And then in some of the countries, in some of the European countries, what we found is that the authorities use succession packages and facilitation services. And what they do is when a family business reaches a certain maturity, or when the founders reach a certain age, they keep getting messages or documentation from the authorities saying, have you considered this? Have you considered that? What are you doing about succession? And we think that these tools are very important to promote, to enable families promote succession and professionalization of their businesses. So these are the areas where we think that families can do, or the authorities can do, around governance, around succession, and around sustainability. The other area,
I mean, if you go back to the slide, I just want to have your opinion about the level of engagement between, let's say, the government and the family businesses. As you know, maybe things a bit different here, not just only in Saudi Arabia, but in the whole region, where business owners believe that they are confident with their businesses, they are confident with the competencies that they have and the competencies of the second generation. Some do not want any engagement or do not want to be influenced by the government in running their businesses. There is, in some cases, a resistance to change, a resistance to be told what to do. So how do you believe we can overcome that misunderstanding and establish a good, healthy relationship, let's say, not necessarily with the government, but with the organizations that support the family businesses, like the National Center for Family Business and the family businesses?
Yes, so that's a very good question, and I think it's important here for family businesses to realize that this is not about, and we're certainly not saying that, it's not about government interfering in the family businesses, but actually government trying to help and understand some of the issues that these family businesses face. Let me give you an example. In the UAE, there's a retail group. And as you know, most family businesses in the region, including UAE and Saudi, are in retail. So in the UAE, there's a retail group being formed, and where it comprises the major families that have retail businesses, and they get together. And what the chambers of commerce are doing is they're encouraging a dialogue between the retail group and the Chamber of Commerce, and obviously the government gets to hear about it. So it's about helping family businesses address some of the issues that they face around rental payments, around employment, around taxation, around rates, and all of those kind of things that families find difficult. So this is not about government interfering or telling family members what to do, but it's completely different. It's actually about helping family businesses. And I think the governments in the region are beginning to realize that it's very important that the family businesses' voice is being heard. And the families also need to take this in a good way. It's not about government interfering in what you're doing. It's about government trying to help. Is that clear? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it answers my question, and I hope it answers the question of our audience, how they perceive, let's say, engagement from the government in the family businesses. This is what we are trying to do, actually, to help the family businesses understand also that whatever the governments are doing is basically to support the family businesses and help them. I think it is also related to the mindset of the maybe the first and the second generation from the family businesses who are confident doing what they've been doing for the last maybe 20 or 30 or 40 years. But what we want to highlight is or the risks that the businesses could face if they don't start immediately and putting everything in place, like the governance and the family constitution. Showing all these risks and the challenges may change the mindset of a lot of family businesses and open their eyes to government and semi-government bodies that are there to help the family businesses. It's clear, and we hope that we deliver this clear message through our conference to all family businesses and establish a healthy relationship with the family businesses.
Yeah. And I think this is a huge benefit on both ways. You know, the stronger the families are, the stronger the economy is, because frankly speaking, family businesses are the backbone of the economy. You know, and if families have issues and they have problems and they start falling apart, the economy will suffer. You know, as I said to you, they're the employers of most of the people, and they own most of the franchises, and they own most of the business activity, and therefore it's very, very important that families are sustainable for the future, because they are so important, and no one can afford families to split up, because that will have a very negative impact, which actually brings me very nicely to the next topic, which is really around family dynamics and family conflicts. I just thought we'd spend a few minutes discussing this very important topic. And recently we did a white paper on this, because, you know, I think we're of strongly belief that this is such an important topic, that unresolved family conflicts and misunderstanding are the family business's biggest enemy. Because it causes such a big problem. But before we go to the detail, we need to examine, first of all, the dynamics of the family businesses. So what do I mean by that? Usually, and most of you have seen these three circles, the family, the management, and the ownership circle. And the reasons we think that conflicts emerge is because there's a lack of understanding and communications between these three dimensions. And therefore, understanding the dynamics is extremely important, as every family member views and the positions they take depends on where they sit on the circle, right? So for example, if you're an active shareholder, you're running the business, you know what's going on. You're a passive shareholder, you don't know what's going on. And unfortunately, what tends to happen in family businesses is nobody tells you what's going on. And therefore, you don't have proper insight as to what's happening in the business because you're a passive shareholder. And this lack of communication and divergence of knowledge causes conflict. And therefore, we'll talk more about the causes of conflicts, but it's important to understand these dynamics. And these dynamics are such that in a family, you will have family members that are working in the business. You will have family members that are just shareholders. You will have family members that are only on the board. So there's different dynamics that relate to family businesses. So here, what I'd like to say here is that, conflicts exists in all families. It exists in my family. It exists in Nora's family, probably. It exists in some of the listeners' families. It will also exist in family businesses. And in my experience, and dealing with family businesses, these conflicts do not necessarily result because of poor business performance, but a lot of these conflicts arise because there's a perception in the minds of people that he or she is unfairly treated, and conflicts also occur because of lack of communication, the fact that situations are not clearly explained and understood, and lack of transparency, and then the perception comes up. And also, I think an important point here is that families wrongly assume that just because they are family, just because we are brothers and sisters, we will agree. And maybe that's true for the second generation, but it gets very difficult when you go to the third generation, because cousin consortiums are a very difficult dynamic as well. And therefore, it's important to understand that family businesses, which were previously owned by siblings from the same mother, are now controlled by cousins with weaker ties. And therefore, there's a huge possibility of conflicts. And therefore, it's extremely important to establish strong business relationship with each other and create rules, and not just rely on the fact that we are related. And as discussed earlier, as the founding generation retires and the senior generation passes away, the likelihood of conflicts between the next generation increases. And therefore, we all have to understand that these conflicts will come about. So what are the core causes of conflicts in family businesses? What are some of the reasons that family fight about? So first of all, and I think I mentioned this before when I was answering Talal's question, it's very important that a family has a common vision for the future. The lack of alignment of vision for the future causes a lot of conflicts. And there's a lot of issues here. You're talking about, different vision between active and passive family members, difference in vision between the current and the future generation. And it's very difficult to make sure you achieve alignment. But families need to work hard to achieve that alignment, because once you achieve alignment, then you can do really, really well. The other area that causes conflicts is around family members working in the business. Family employment is very difficult to manage. So, for example, performance evaluation of family members can be quite tricky. It can get very emotional and sensitive. When you have a situation where a family member is not doing well, and all of a sudden he or she is told that he or she needs to step down. The other thing is, there's also this question of, why is he the CEO? Why am I not the CEO? Why is his son doing well? Why is not my son being promoted? So this decision about, family employment and who can work in the business and all of that is becoming a big issue. And a lot of families are actually going through these discussions at the moment around what their vision should be around family members working in the business. Because what they're saying is, look, if we have good people working in the business, and if they do well, we will promote them, we will give them incentives, we'll give them bonuses, etc. If they're not doing well, we may have to ask them to leave. But if it's family members, that flexibility becomes very difficult. And therefore, I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. All I'm saying is the family employment issues causes a number of conflicts within family businesses as well. The other issues, and I think Nora has covered this as well, it's about communication, it's about transparency, it's around dividends as well. The balance between the family requirements and the requirements of the business. Nora talked about that. That's an important issue, and that causes issues between family members. I have a story which I'd like to share with you around dividends. I went to see this particular family, and they had 4 brothers. And we were talking about dividends, and the family were beginning to have some serious discussions around dividends, because that has an impact. It had an impact in their business. But they said to me, look, we have a very unique way of calculating dividends, and it really has been working for us for a long time. So I said to them, okay, well, how does it work? And they said, look, we're 4 brothers. And just let me give you a bit of background. The first brother spends a lot of money. Okay, he buys his wife diamond rings, buys his sons cars, new cars, Ferraris, etc. He buys himself yachts. So he spends a lot of money, and he draws a lot of money every month. Okay, the other brother actually doesn't spend at all. He's a bit of a miser. He spends very less. And the other 2 brothers are just average spenders. And what they do is they have a very simple way. They say, what we do is we allow family members to draw whatever they like. And then at the end of the year, we have a look to see who's taken the most dividend, right? And surprise, surprise, the first family member always leads the league because he's taken so much money, okay? And what they do is they draw a line and they say, okay, well, the first brother has taken so much, so the next 3 brothers will take the same as what the first has taken, to be fair. Now, that's not sustainable because in some years, they actually drew more than the profitability of the company. And therefore, this whole thing about dividends creates a lot of issues, because, a lot of the lifestyle of the passive shareholders depend on the level of dividends. But so making sure that family members understand how dividends are formulated and all the stuff that Nora has talked about is very, very important. The role of the in-laws is very important, and we have to make sure that we understand what the role of the in-laws are, and this has to be consistently applied as well, whether they should work in the business, whether they should not work in the business. Because if we don't have consistent rules, sometimes these in-laws can turn out to be outlaws, and you can have quite a lot of issues. The other thing that causes conflict, and Nora spoke about that, is family exits. So if you don't allow family members to exit, it's like putting a family member in jail. Okay, one day that family member will find the key to get out of the jail. And when he finds this key, there will be blood on the floor. And therefore, why go through all this trouble? Make sure you have a good exit process, you have a fair basis of valuation, so that when the time is right, when somebody wants to leave, yes, you try and discourage them from leaving. But if they're determined to leave, then there is a clear process of valuation and things like that. The other issues that causes conflicts in some of the family businesses, where you have a situation where you have a founder with 3 wives, and you have 2 or 3 wives, and you have different branches. And what tends to happen is, as long as the founder is alive, in some cases, there are no conflicts between the different branches. But as soon as the founder passes away, all of a sudden, the rest of the family members start to fight. And therefore, these are some of the conflicts, the reason for why conflicts occur. Now, how do these conflicts impact family?
Amin, before we move to the second slide, you mentioned at the beginning the vision of the family. Now, does that mean that the vision of the family is different from the vision of the, let's say, the organization or the corporate. Does that mean that the family from the beginning should have their own vision as family members who are partners in an organization, and their vision is separate than the vision and the mission, let's say, of the organization?
So that's a good question. And when I talk about the future strategy and the vision of the family, I also include the vision of the business as well. So let me explain to a bit more clearly. So one thing is the family needs to have a vision as to what is it that they're going to do. Are they going to stay together? If they're going to stay together, how are they going to formalize their business relationship? What are they going to do about the major issues that family members will usually face? I spoke about employment. I spoke about exits. I spoke about decision making. So this is the vision of the family. How are we going to empower the next generation? Are we going to help the next generation? What are we going to do about education? What are we going to do about mentoring? Are we going to have funds for the next generation? So this is around the vision of the family wanting to stay together. Now, as part of the vision, the shareholders appoint a board, right? And they appoint a board, and it's the board's responsibility to set the strategy of the business going forward. Of course, the strategy has to be in line with what the shareholders want. But that's getting into the detail of what is the direction our business is going to face? What businesses are we going to be in? What returns are we going to get? Are there certain businesses that we shouldn't be in? Are certain businesses that are not in accordance with Sharia, and therefore we don't want to go in? So what I'm trying to say is, when it comes to vision, there is a vision of the family and there's the vision of the business, okay? But both of these are equally important, and family members or family shareholders need to get involved in those as well. Okay?
Yes, it's clear now. I think you touched base on important issues that causes conflict in family businesses. Yes, we can proceed. I have a lot of questions, so bear with me. We still have
That's okay.
20
That's
minutes.
okay. That's okay. That's okay. We're happy to answer any questions you want. Do you want to ask them now, or do you want to wait?
No, when it comes on the topics.
Okay, all right. No, it's good. I mean, the more questions you ask, the more clarity, because I mean, we can't cover everything, and therefore, when you ask these questions, they're very important, because then we can elaborate a bit more. So how do conflicts impact family wealth? Sadly, conflicts tend to destroy successful businesses, not just in terms of destroying value, but destroying reputation. And some families fragment into less effective units. And sometimes I've seen a lot of families where egos are at play. And, you know, when there are egos at play, family members do not care the fact that family value is being destroyed. They just want to be right, and they just want to prove a point. And therefore, these conflicts can be quite destructive. And also, as family members start to fight with each other, the family harmony and relationships are obviously negatively impacted. And what happens is the family members tend to not just leave the family business, but also leave the family itself. And we've seen a lot of families that have ended up in courts, for instance. And you know, the courts implement a very strict asset management under dispute rules. And we found that a lot of these assets that are owned by family shareholders get frozen because of these conflicts. And we've seen a number of these in Saudi, we've seen a number of these in the UAE and in the region as well. The important thing, and I'll never forget what one famous founder said once, and he said, to succeed in business, but to fail the family is to fail. Let me repeat that again. To succeed in business, but to fail the family is to fail. It doesn't matter how much money you make, but in the process of making all this money, if you fail the family, what have you really achieved? Okay, so the conflicts play a lot of importance here. So what are the steps that some of the families take to help minimize conflicts? I go back to the common vision issue, and I think this is so important. Families need to formulate a common vision for the future. And what is their philosophy about what is it that they're going to do in the future. And as I said to you, this is a difficult process, but you must spend time. Families must spend time on this. The other thing is families should create family rules. Some families call it family constitution or family protocols. It doesn't matter what you call it, but you need to family need to create these rules. Now, often, the consultants are called when it's too late. Usually, sometimes we're called when the families are already fighting with each other, and it's probably too late to do anything about it, although in some cases you can. But the best time to create these rules is when the family is in reasonable harmony. When you're in reasonable harmony, then you could create those rules. The other thing that families need to do is to create different forums. Different forums, what do I mean by that? There's a forum that addresses business issues. There's a forum that addresses the family issues, which is the family council. There's a forum that handles shareholders issues, which is the shareholders assembly, etc. And therefore, we need to develop these forums so that family members can raise their voice. What you don't want is business issues to be combined with family issues, to be combined with all these other issues. You need to decouple family issues from these business issues. And also, families need to create proper governance, proper boards, put in independent directors, promote transparency, encourage accountability. All of those kind of things are very, very important to minimize conflicts. Also, I think this is a soft issue, but I think that the concept of fairness is extremely important. To me, I think fairness is a key ingredient. When you're preparing rules and protocols for the family, you need to be fair with the shareholders, whether they're working in the business or not working in the business. The fairness is quite an important aspect of it. And usually conflicts occur because there's a perception in people's mind that they're being unfairly treated. Okay. And finally, I think Nora raised this as well. It's about making sure that we have a proper conflict resolution mechanism. So, when you create these rules and protocols, the possibility of conflicts are reduced. However, there will always be conflicts in families because families are very emotional. And it's important that families have a mechanism to address conflicts, because what you don't want is family members to take their conflicts and discuss it with their friends and their lawyers outside the family business, because that's like washing your dirty laundry in public. And that has a huge impact on the reputation of the family. And therefore, we see now families creating conflict resolution mechanisms or committees, and these are made up of respected, independent members who the family trusts, who then will try and amicably resolve these issues. Some of the governments in the region have set up committees to address these conflicts. So I'm part of a committee that one of the governments have set up. This comprises of various respected businesses, and they are looking at one or two of the conflicts that some of the families face to make sure that they come to a resolution so that the family members come out of it having their issues resolved. So these are some of the actions that families can take to minimize conflict. It's not rocket science. These are very, very simple things that families can do. it's not complicated to address your issue about complexity. You just have to set up some simple mechanism, some simple procedures, encourage transparency, encourage communication, be fair to family members, set up rules that govern their business relationships with each other, make sure the next generation is not confused. In many families that I work with, the next generation are confused. They don't know where they belong. They see their fathers fighting with their uncles, and they say, look, we don't want to be in this situation. Families should motivate the next generation because they're the future leaders, etc. So these are some of the things that families should do to address conflict. So I hope that Nora and I have been able to address some of these issues that we've been looking at. And thank you for listening to us. And we're happy to take whatever questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Amin. Thank you so much, Nora. Actually, our time have come to an end for this session. It was very informative. We enjoyed a lot what you shared with us, and we believe that we've tackled through this panel a lot of important issues. One of the findings that I want to recap with is what you just mentioned last, that it is not rocket science. It requires, to be honest, some effort from the family members. And I believe that all families should look at the governance and the succession plan and the family constitution as an investment, a long-term investment, something that they can realize after a while. It is the safety net for family businesses. You tackled also and talked about a very important thing, which is basically communicating between the family members. And I believe in some areas, communication is unfortunately, we don't have effective communication between family members due to some social habits and social behavior where the young family members have great respect to the older family members, and sometimes they don't open up to them and they don't share their fears and concerns with them. Communication is very important. I believe that the senior family members in a family business should engage the younger generation from an early stage to build their capabilities to become the future leaders of the organization. Maybe a lot of families, when they look at the process, they believe that this process is going to consume a lot of their time. But I believe that you don't have to rush into everything. You don't have to finish everything in one day. Take your time, because even the family constitution needs to be revisited from time to time, needs to be adjusted according to the changes that happens to the family and the family members and the family business. So what is your, I want two advices, to be honest, one from you, Amin, and one from Nora, to the family businesses here in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, so I think that my strong advice is to concentrate around the future. So we've talked a lot about the rules. We've talked a lot about the constitution of the family, and that's all very, very important. But another issue that's very important is around future leadership of the family business. Because, you know, if you want family businesses to be sustainable, you have to look at the future. And in my experience and reading some of the researches that I've done around not just the Middle East, but around the globe, and as I said this before, 80% of the family businesses fail because of lack of good leadership. Okay, so my advice to families is to really encourage the next generation of family members to understand the obligation, the importance of the family business, the importance of staying together, the importance of creating value for the future family members. And this is very, very important. And you know, these families, businesses in the Middle East need to grow by double digits, because family businesses in the family members in the Middle East are much bigger in size compared to the West. You know, an average family in the West has 2 or 3 children. Families in the Middle East have, you know, 7 or 8 children. And therefore, in order to maintain the same amount of lifestyle, you have to increase your profitability going forward. Okay? Otherwise, the future generation will not have the same lifestyle. And therefore, leadership is very, very important. We need to make sure that the next generation understand the responsibility. I was in a family meeting last week, and I can share this with you. We had a meeting with the founder of the business and his children in the same room. And in this meeting, the founder was doing all the talking, and he was very dominant in these meetings. And none of the children said a word, and none of the next generation said anything. After the meeting, I went up and I went up to the founder's office, and I said to him, listen, I've got something very important to say to you, and please don't take this the wrong way. But that meeting didn't go well at all. He said, what do you mean? You know, it was a great meeting. You know, everybody understood and agreed with me. And I said, that's exactly what happened. You did all the talking. There was no seeking of views from the next generation. Leadership is about listening to others. It's about sharing the vision with others, having a debate, having a discussion, and then making decisions. And therefore, the next generation need to be educated. They need to be trained. They need to be mentored by the current generation. So that's my advice. Sorry, I took long to answer.
That's very useful.
Thank you. Yes, Nora, please.
My advice would be to build on the strength and advantages they have. Family businesses are very fortunate to have this structure, and especially in our region. So I would say just keep the communication between the family members. That's very important, and make sure that you are always having it. You always have clear and transparent set of rules between the family members and running the business.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Amin. Thank you so much, Nora. And I would like also to thank all our audience and our colleagues from PwC for joining us today and sharing the outcomes of the study that has been conducted with the National Center for Family Businesses. Thank you for everything, and we will meet again, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for listening to us.
Bye-bye.